It's a great pleasure to welcome Esteban Padilla, who is joining us. Where's my list of things? Where's he joining us from? I've lost my notes. Oh no,
Oh,
Thomas. If
uh,
you
no problem. I'm joining you from Houston. Give me a second. The screen share was a little wonky, so
just check,
let's
I've got everything here.
let's try it this way. Okay, everyone can see that. Does that look good?
Perfect. Over to you, Esteban. Thank you so much for being with us.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much. Let me readjust because I have to use a different screen now. All right, so thank you very much. As I was introduced, my name is Esteban Padilla, and my presentation is going to be on evaluating the undergraduate musical pedagogy factors that lead to lifelong professional eudaimonia issues. It's a very, very long title. Very simply put though, what causes long-term health issues for musicians, and can you see those at the undergraduate level? We've been having conferences and talks about eudaimonia for the past 2 days. I want to let you know how I interpreted eudaimonia though. There's a definition that I really liked that talks about eudaimonia as human flourishing. And so when I'm looking at these factors, I'm thinking about what is it that really helps a musician flourish? What is it that are the things that really help them in the long run to be healthy, happy, successful musicians? So first things first, though, I want everyone to grab a piece of paper. So grab a piece of paper, grab a pen. If you don't have one, I guess you can mentalize it, but this exercise works much more better if you have something to work with. Likewise, I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple minutes. I'll tell you about who I am. In the meantime, I did my undergraduate work at the University of Texas Pan Am. It's now the University of Texas RGV. I got a bachelor in science and chemistry and then minors in biology, psychology, and music. Currently a graduate student at the University of St. Thomas, and I'm pursuing a liberal arts degree in music and psychology with a focus on music therapy research and music science. So that's where I'm coming from with a lot of this stuff. So hopefully you all have paper, hopefully you have pens, hopefully you have something to, if you don't have these things, make sure you have like a sketch pad in your head so you can go ahead and do this exercise mentally. And I want everyone to think about the body part you use the most to make music. Could be your vocal cords if you're a singer, it could be lips or tongues, maybe if you're a wind player, hands, shoulders, guitarists, violinists, DJs. I know we have a few DJs here. Those are very heavy on the hands and the arms. Whatever it is, I want you to isolate that part of your body in your head. So just pick one and draw it in the most detail you possibly can. And I mean, I'm talking about muscular skeletal level. Get really, really, really specific with it. And label whatever you can. So I'm going to go ahead and give you like half a minute to do that. I have a little jingle. Let's see if it plays. So I don't know if y'all can hear that or not. If you can't, I'm going to take a sip of mate while this goes on. Okay, so gave everyone a little bit of time. Hopefully that gave you some enough time to at least sketch something. I'm very sure everybody had wonderful drawings like this, or like this, or maybe you had a wonderful drawing like this. Just kidding, I'm pretty sure you had drawings like this. This is what I drew doing that own exercise of myself. And I want to point out, like I said, I have a science background. I have taken a few anatomy courses, and even still, it's really hard to mentalize and come up with all these different parts of our body in such a short notice. But that's something that I want us all to think about, because that's going to kind of come back in and circle around later when we start talking about these factors. And hopefully this also wakes everyone up so they're paying attention. I know it's lunchtime. So there have been a lot of studies floating around about the health of musicians. A lot of studies, this is becoming a more and more common theme about the longevity of a career in music, the effects it can have on you, kinds of depression and anxiety that musicians face. I chose this specific study to highlight because this study is a cross-disciplinary study in that several genres and disciplines of music were studied. So we're talking classical, folk, jazz, R&B, hip hop, pretty much any musical genre, there was someone that was surveyed. And this is actually one of the largest surveys of its kind. And so Help Musicians UK did this survey where they asked 2,200 participants, about a lot of the factors that are affecting their ability to become healthy musicians. And there's a lot of statistics here. You've had some time to look at it. It's not anything new. I feel like I'm preaching to possibly literally the choir here when we talk about there are a lot of endemic health issues to being a musician. I do want to highlight real quick though, this specifically, these two right here, these circles. So right here we have, do you find it easy to get help for your health issues? And majority, or at least over half, have stated that no, I don't find it easy to get help issues for I don't find it easy to get help for my health issues, for my mental health. And then down here we have, do you feel there are gaps in provisions of services for musicians? And over half the respondents of the survey said yes, there are gaps. Then 40% said I don't know. And that's also concerning in its own right, because this suggests that musicians don't understand how they need help. There are some hesitations to getting mental health. It is a little taboo, and even in the music community, it's still taboo. And most musicians don't know how to approach that that hurdle right there. So that was professional musicians. I wanted to take a step back and look at undergraduate musicians. And I found this very good thesis on undergraduate student stress and burnout. The author, Orzel, submitted it as their graduation thesis, and it was a really good survey. So 100 students were surveyed at an undisclosed urban university in California, and they were asked several questions about stress factors in their lives. The main takeaway I want for this presentation, for everyone to understand, is that the schoolwork was the biggest stressor. 93% felt that they were overwhelmed by schoolwork right there. But I do want to also highlight that 35% felt that it was from a lack of teacher and administrative help. And 37% stated that they felt that they wanted more freedom to pursue musical studies over their general education classes, but it wasn't because they felt that they were wasting time on general education. They just felt that there was too many music classes. There was too many music classes that expected way too much out of them. 13 collegiate units here translated to 9 classes. I can tell you that for my own undergraduate career, that if that had been a science degree, 13 units would have been 4, maybe 5 classes at most. And yet musicians were taking twice as many classes. And if you have music classes, you know, they do build up very, very quickly, and the work piles up greatly. So here's some more statistics. And really here, the main thing to show you is that the amount of stress that they experienced overall and the amount of stress they experienced in music classes were pretty much identical, suggesting that there is a correlation between the workload of being a music student as well as the workload of just being a student or existing, period, as a young adult. You know, this is a very vulnerable time period for a lot of people. So I wanted to kind of break this down and talk about, like, what are some ways we can look at this? What are some perspectives? And as someone who is pursuing some psychology coursework as well at the graduate level, I decided to use a therapeutic or a counseling perspective. And I modeled this after a few different types of therapy. I think existential therapy probably fits the best mold just because it's so flexible, but there are some aspects of like person-centered therapy, self-deterministic therapy. And basically what I want to do is, you know, these students are the patient, they are the client, they have a lot of issues in the long term, and there's things that they're struggling from. So let's break down the factors that can affect their long-term health. You know, what are the things that can help in this long-term eudaimonia issues that they are facing? So what I did was I equated the student to the client or the patient. I equated their teacher to a therapist or a coach. Especially private instructors are probably the most influential people on an undergraduate student. I mean, these are the people literally teaching them how to practice and gain their craft. They are learning the most from those people, and they have the most personal relationship with those instructors. And oftentimes, private instructors call themselves coaches anyways, so it's very appropriate terminology for that. The third factor, though, is environment. And here, environment means literally everything else. So everything that is not a student or teacher. I have other, so all the other factors, and so student and this, and the also, which is the teacher, and also these things. And I mean that to mean that the context of the relationship and also the outside of the relationship is just as influential as the relationship itself, truthfully, because these environmental factors affect both students and teachers. And you can see that in my next slide here. So oftentimes when we talk about pedagogy factors, we talk about them as individualized, isolated factors. So things a student can do, things a teacher can do, things that can be better done with a system, because there are some systemic issues in music education. However, from a lot of the literature I've read and a lot of the studies that have been done, this is not the most common way that we actually should be looking, or it's not the most common way that pedagogy actually plays out, so to speak. Oftentimes it really looks more like this. There's a lot of overlapping factors. There's a lot of things that are multidimensional factors. You know, take for example, a teacher having a financial dispute with their institution. I mean, you know, that is an overlap here between the teacher and the environment, but that's going to affect the student too. You think an unsatisfied teacher is going to be a good teacher? Generally not. So these kind of things overlap a lot more, a great deal more than we think they really do. And it becomes really hard to isolate them one by one. That being said, I try to create like a narrative, so to speak, by isolating some factors. And you can see that here. So this will be the kind of the conclusion of this analysis. We're going to go ahead and talk about these three factors from these three perspectives and how they build together to create eudaimonic success or honestly failure sometimes. Isolated is in quotations because obviously things are rarely isolated, like I said before. So we have a student factor, and the student factors are their educational options and their coursework that they pursue. The teacher factor is their knowledge as athletic coaches. Remember our body mapping exercise? That's gonna come in handy soon. And environmental factors are the institution and network support that they can provide, both these individuals. So these are two different studies that talk about some of the issues with environmental factors, and both of them are talking about low income, disadvantaged individuals, because just statistically speaking, those are the people that suffer the most. And even when you get into music, a lot of poor, low income minority individuals tend to have a harder time with music education. But regardless of your socioeconomic status, well, for the most part at least, with respect to systemic issues and long-term issues, higher education is just getting really, really expensive for everyone. This right here is a particular essay from a law review where someone went, it was from the California Law Review, and what they did was they went and looked on a national scale of all of the different issues with finances in schools. And what they found was that household income has stagnated for the past couple decades, but the rate of inflation especially has increased greatly. And then the cost of higher education has increased much more so. So school is costing more than the rate of inflation and how much money households are making, which means that even traditionally middle class individuals are starting to feel that financial pressure. Additionally, on top of that, people that are coming from these historically disadvantaged groups, they're struggling more because there's a greater risk of debt for them. And there's also other factors that get associated with that. When there's a greater risk of debt, you're less likely to graduate. Even if you do graduate, there are factors that lead to issues with lifelong employment. I mean, the health issues and the financial issues you face in undergraduate careers can last a lifetime. You get into $50,000, $100,000 of debt as an undergrad, that's going to follow you for a while. And we always talk about music careers being not very well earning careers, but these colleges seem to keep putting these price tags as if there will be a financial payout for the student, that there is a guarantee. And it's not necessarily that. It's been shown that it's more of a risk than a guarantee. Similarly, this study right here in Vancouver that I have right here at the bottom, so the second one, was about going out to low income and low socioeconomic individuals within the downtown East Side community, where they were doing intervention programs. So music intervention, music education, humanities education actually was a really big part of it in general. So just whole humanities overall, but also music therapists. They were going out and they were seeking these individuals, and they're kind of working with them to say, okay, well, you used to play a trumpet when you were in school. Have you thought about playing a trumpet? What if we got you a trumpet and you started rehearsing with us in our bands? We'll pay you to come to rehearsals. We'll pay you to do performances. You know, if you're clean and sober, we'll help you busk, and we'll help you make some money, and we'll work with you that way. And so a lot of these were trying to come up with interventionist strategies to work with individuals from low income backgrounds and low socioeconomic backgrounds. However, one of the things that they've noticed was that it wasn't a guaranteed success. The way you address these individuals played a big role on if they actually succeeded or not. So for example, if you were to tell someone in one of these classes or one of these groups that, hey, you know, you're really smart and you're such a great performer, but have you thought about maybe, what if we got you some nicer clothes and helped you, you know, go to a salon to clean yourself up a little bit so that you can maybe be a little bit more presentable for an interview? Intentionally pointing out their low income status hurt them. It hurt them in the long run, and it actually was detrimental to the effects of the long-term study. Additionally, this was also a little concerning. The facilitators benefited far more often than the presenters, the participants, excuse me. So the people conducting all of these intervention strategies, the therapists, the conductors, the educators, they were benefiting far greater and more often than the participants themselves. You know, this was a nice steady job. They're making a lot of income. This is it's some great, you know, civil duty points that they can use on the resume. It's an unfortunate aspect, but that was what the data suggested. Since we're talking about instructors, let's talk about teacher factor. And so the teacher factor here I want to talk about is a knowledge as an athletic coach. There are two kind of wham bam quotes that I came across in literature that I decided to just put in here because they're really good. My first one is probably my favorite one, honestly, is from the thesis that Orzel did. And it is not guaranteed that music teachers have awareness of healthy learning processes. And that's kind of like a mic drop quote right there, because we discussed this a little bit earlier in a previous presentation. But just because you're a PhD professor does not mean you know the best way to teach a student or what's best for that student necessarily. It does inform your opinion, and you obviously have expertise if you've reached that level. But most of them are not medical doctors. And having that lack of knowledge there means that there can be some lack of oversight when suggesting certain things or when identifying certain issues that students are facing, excuse me. That kind of feeds into the next quote, which is that music educators who teach are actually physical education instructors for small muscles. And we don't talk about the kinestology of music nearly enough. I know we do, but we don't talk about it nearly enough, truthfully. So much of music education is focused on musicality and artistry, which needs to be a focal point. Don't get me wrong, that's absolutely a focal point. But we don't talk about the physical body enough. We don't talk about the various stressors and factors that the physical body is affected by in the music process. Not nearly enough. Why is it that we are still referring to pedagogy texts that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, when in truth, these pedagogy texts, I mean, they had very limited medical knowledge then. We know so much more now that's so much more different. And yet we are still referring to 17th century, 18th century's treaties. You know, there does need to be some kind of understanding that pedagogy should change and that people should grow and learn over time. Professional development is very important. And it's not only up to the teacher to pursue professional development themselves, but it's also up to institutions to provide professional development for them. They're doing a great disservice by not opening up programs and assisting their professors and their instructors to go learn more about, especially in regards to health practices and education. I mean, those are things that we should continuously be learning about, and yet we're not really addressing that at the institution level for teachers. And that affects the students too. It is a trickle-down effect. This lack of knowledge does affect the student as well. If a teacher can't identify, and I mean that they don't need to be a medical professional. That's something that the Trollinger text discusses. You don't have to be a doctor, but you should be able to recognize that, hey, your wrist is a little swollen. Maybe you should go see this kind of doctor. I have a little clause there. There is a little footnote. I call it the Esteban vocalist advantage clause. And that's because vocalists do have an advantage in this department. Their instrument is their body. And typically speaking, vocalists are a little bit better educated, or actually, honestly, sometimes a lot more better educated when it comes to their physical health, because they know that they need to take care of their instrument. If they do not take care of their voice or the rest of their body, they're not going to perform well. And so they do have a slight advantage in this area. That being said, they could still always learn more. I have spoken to several professors who seem to have like false notions about medications and the effect they have on their body, even though there's literature from the vocal department. We actually have a vocal medical school here in Houston, or a vocal medical department here in Houston, that releases information about medications that are good for the voice and usable for the voice that aren't detrimental, that I know a lot of professors aren't really aware of. And it's a little concerning because, once again, this is long-term health that we're talking about. This brings us back to the student, and this is where we're going to conclude for today. So I have a quote here: the outside of the area of performance anxiety, very little has been written in regard to counseling with musicians. And this is from an article literally titled Musician Health. The reason why I put that there is we talk about use stress and distress as far as aspects for learning and performance and whatever. We talk about managing our performance anxiety to become better performers. We don't talk about just the anxiety of existing and how that affects us as musicians. We don't talk about the anxiety and depression and all that affects us being able to perform, period. Or just live, I should say, because we are talking about it for performance. We're not talking about it for simply being healthy musicians. Along with that, students are actively telling us these things. Orzel highlights that a lot of students in the survey were actively telling them that they wish that they had different education options. And Orzel points out there are some music programs that do offer things like wellness, they offer business, they offer appropriate time management, time management courses and instruction that actually focuses on musicians and not just general time management, because time management as a musician does not mean the same thing compared to time management for a doctor or a lawyer. It's just not the same. There is a different method there. There's also classes of health, physical health, professional health, performance health. There are different areas of health that musicians deserve education in, and we're not providing that at the undergraduate level, and that's affecting them in the long term. These things are creating endemic issues, and honestly, we could probably go further back even to before they were undergraduates. With that being said, we talk about the end result and the struggles at the end. We don't talk about the path that led there very often, and that is the point of this presentation. That is the concern that I'm raising here. Based on literature, we need to discuss that a lot more with our undergraduate students, and we need to address those issues there before they become professionals and have to cope with what could possibly be long-term damage by then. Here's some further reading to consider. These are two different studies that were surveys as well. I included them here at the end because they're good, useful information, but they're not necessarily, they need to be rehashed. We all understand there's a lot of issues in health. If you want full references from me, this is my email right here. Feel free to email me if you want to talk about this a little bit further. But otherwise, thank you very much, and thank you for your time.